What is up, football fans? I'm Danny Austin. This is the Live from the 55 podcast, recording here in our Marta Loop, Calgary, Alberta studios, the Nation Network. Happy to be here. It was a Sunday morning. Got Ian Busby from City TV popping in, my pal and yours, to talk about a weekend in the CFL that sort of clarified some things, I would say. Obviously, the Bombers were sitting out, so that race at the top of the West between the Lions and Bombers grew ever closer, with the Lions beating the Edmonton Elks 37-29 in a game that, hey man, these Elks, they fight. You like it. They're not going to make the playoffs, but I do like the way that that team plays football. Trey Ford, what a player. But this being a Calgary-based podcast, I was at McMahon Stadium yesterday to see the Stampeders fall 28-11 in a game that sort of felt like we end of sort of talking about the Stampeders as a real playoff contender. It's not over. There's a path, but they're just not winning games. And they could technically beat Hamilton, and the Riders could lose, and all of a sudden the Stamps beat the Riders in a head-to-head, and we're looking at the Stamps having a real good shot at making the playoffs. So I'm not saying it's not there, but it was just such a roller coaster of emotions if you're a Stamps fan this weekend. Weekend starts, it's Friday night. The Ottawa Redblacks sort of shocked the CFL world with a 36-28 win over Saskatchewan Roughriders. I don't know if that was that much of a shock. The Riders have not been particularly good lately, but it opened up the door. And if you were here in Calgary, you're looking at it and saying, all right, beat the Alouettes, and it's there. The Riders are struggling right now. There's no denying that. After their sort of Labor Day or day before Labor Day win over the Bombers, they got crushed the next week. They've now lost 3 in a row. Okay, they're not going anywhere. If you can, Stamps have at the time 5 games left, win 4 of them, and maybe even 3 of them, and you got a good shot. And then they go out and they lose 28-11. And I've covered a lot of Stampeders games. I started covering this team in 2016. Obviously, the Grey Cup losses in 16 and 17, we're devastating low points. I'm not comparing this to that, but it just sort of felt this is, there was an energy post game that just felt defeated, and they were defeated. So maybe that's just natural, but they didn't look like a winning football team up there, and I think there's a lot of talent on this team. I think there's a lot of great guys on this team, but it has not come together this season. There's no denying that. And I sort of wrote in my story for the Sun and the Herald here in Calgary that, it doesn't matter if there's a path if you're not winning games. You have to win games. And there were 2 interceptions in sort of key moments, one on the opening drive, and then one after Nick Stats made a really great interception at the start of the second half. The Stamps get the ball, they march downfield, and they throw a pick in the end zone. And get points from those 2 drives. Who knows what's happening? But instead, it's sort of interceptions. And yeah, it just sort of we're really gonna get into this with Busby, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But if you're a Stamps fan, I get it. You're frustrated. They're not making the playoffs. I do think some of the anger just a little bit overblown. This team has been very good for very long, and the reality is, in the CFL, there are 3 teams that miss the playoffs every year. It looks like this year that's going to be one of the Stamps are going to be one of them. But I don't know that this involves blowing it up in the off season. I have no idea what the plans are. I think you're going to see some changes. I think that they're going to need to bring players in who have a little of CFL experience winning games. And I don't know, something's missing right now. It's hard when you have 17 players on the 6-game injured list. That's a lot of talent that's just missing. And no one wants me to make excuses, but we're trying to find explanations here. And I do think that those 17 players matter. And they're big players. James Vaughters, Malik Henry, it's Peyton Logan was, had a great start to the year. Important player. I don't know. Something's not clicking right now. And I don't honestly, I just feel like there's a level where you just got to get the season over with. There's been too many mistakes. too many difficult moments, a lot of frustration, and I have trouble seeing it turning around. Obviously, I like a lot of people on that team and in that locker room, and a lot of the coaching staff. So I'm not gonna come here and just start saying fire this guy or that guy. I've had some people say, "Oh, is Dickinson? Is it too much for him to be GM head coach?" I don't think so. Just surprise me if they sort of switch some roles around a little bit in the offseason. No, of course not. But I don't know. Well, it's not Dave's fault that Reggie Begelton fumbled the ball late in the game. It's not like those picks aren't on him. Um, that's that. I will say, and I want to spend a minute on this. I imagine on Wednesday, I'm going to try to figure out a way to go a little bit deeper on it, but I can't not talk about Sean Lemon. I tweeted about it. People people seem to like that tweet, but Sean Lemon, former Stampeder, 4 defensive tackles, 2 sacks, 1 interception. Those 2 sacks bring his numbers to 99. He has 99 sacks in his career. It's a very short list of players who have gotten to 100 sacks in CFL history, and I just think, in part because he's moved around so much and has played for different teams, it's not one fan base that celebrates him and really, lifts him up and helps his reputation in that way. But this guy, we need to spend the whole week. He is probably going to get to 100 sacks. That is a huge accomplishment, and this needs to be the story of the week. Well, to be fair, Winnipeg and Toronto are playing, so that is probably going to be the story of the week. But there's got to be a way to celebrate Sean Lemon and really give him his due, because that's a huge accomplishment. It's a huge milestone. Um, he was incredible, and to think that he was released by the Lions, and my understanding is that was largely a ratio thing. But he was released by the Lions in training camp and then didn't play until week 8. Had to wait for a contract. This guy was the West Division most outstanding defensive player last year. I think I voted for him for most outstanding defensive player for the whole league. Obviously, he didn't win it, but this is a guy who did that last year, and he just seems so criminally undervalued. And that pick at the beginning of the game was huge. Sucked the life out of the Stampeders, who had a nice opening drive, and then he had a huge sack late in the game. This guy comes up in big moments with big plays, and I'm sure he wanted to get to 100 against Calgary. That's where he spent the most time. I don't actually have that in front of me. I don't know that for sure, but sure feels like he spent the most time in Calgary. I'm sure he would have loved to do it. They didn't re-sign him last year. And I don't know the details there. I don't know if they made him a contract offer or anything like that. But this is one of the true stars of our league, and this is a guy who I think for some reason, before he came to Calgary for the second time, he signed at the end of camp in 2021 after being released by the Elks. The Saints desperately needed a defensive end. He came in and just did what he did, which is just sort of pick up sacks. And I think I even had this idea of Sean Lemon as being a bad egg, or Sean Lemon's only looking out for Sean Lemon. I I think I'd heard that, and I have talked about this a little bit on the podcast before. It's just so blatantly untrue, and this is just a guy who deserves the respect of fans, of media. I know he has the respect of his fellow players. You talk to any of his former teammates, and they all love him. The fact that he's bounced around and looked for the best opportunity for himself, that's what I would do if I was an athlete. I'll be perfectly honest with you about that. And I think the fact that he's come back to teams is a real indication of who he is in the locker room. And I just think he's an incredible player. And he reminded us last night, if you were in Calgary, uh, him leaving, I know a lot of people didn't love, but he's with the Montreal Alouettes, and they've got a heck of a player there. And getting to 100 sacks is something I've got to figure it out. I'm not going to be able to hear from Calgary while covering the Flames and doing a little bit of Stampeders. I'm probably not going to be able to write a big story on the amazingness of Sean Lemon, but I hope that TSN, I hope that obviously CFL.ca, I know in Montreal, my colleague Herb Zerkowski, I know Didier, I know all those guys are going to do their best to make sure that, this accomplishment gets celebrated. It's something that other leagues do such a great job about, but, it should be on everybody's radar. 100 sacks is a really, really big deal. And, this guy goes out, just does it week in and week out. And again, those he had some big plays. Those weren't just end the game when it was out of reach for the Stampede or Sean Lemon was picking up stats or something. No, they were big moments in the game, and it's just incredible. And it was an honor for me to get to cover him. He's obviously been on the podcast a couple times. He's a guy who just personally I have a tremendous amount of affection and respect for, and it was just very cool to get to see Sean Lemon do that. So on Wednesday, I'm gonna try to figure out a way to talk about that more, but I just wouldn't feel right not talking about it because I want to celebrate that, and then I want to celebrate. Honestly, we are 5 days away here. Biggest game of the year is coming up. If you're a CFL fan, you're going to be watching on Friday night. Toronto versus Winnipeg in Winnipeg. Winnipeg's coming off a bye week, but the Argos are just cruising right now. 12-1, lay a beating on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They just don't let up, and we have talked. It probably took me 4 or 5 weeks, given that they were the Grey Cup champions. I don't know why I ever had any doubts, but right now, if you were the Argos, you were going in and you were wanting to put the Bombers in the mud. You were wanting to sort of leave them in the dust and leave no question as to who was the best regular season game. And I think you want to be going into the Grey Cup. Assuming you get there, you still are going to have to win the East Division final. But let's say it's you versus the Bombers. You don't want there to be questions about what happened at the end of September. You don't want everyone saying, oh, well, the Argos were the best team in the league, but in the biggest game of the year against the Bombers, they fell short. That's not the narrative you want at the Grey Cup. You want the narrative to be, this is a, well-oiled machine. So for me, I don't know. This is just a absolutely massive, massive game. And man, I'm somewhat responsible for this stuff. I have a voice around this league, and I probably haven't done as good a job hyping things up. Sean Lemon included. This game we can't pull away from. This has got to be. If you're in the marketing department, pump this up. I know there's 3 other games, but this is the big one. This is the one we've all been waiting for. Grey Cup rematch. Let's see it. You're a writer. Talk about it. Got a podcast. Talk about it. So yeah, anyways, I'm really excited. There's some other games this weekend. Riders, Lions. It's a tough game for the Riders. Team that needs to win. Lions are flying. Alouettes, Red Blacks. Who knows, man? The Alouettes looked pretty good, pretty okay. Pretty good against the Stamps, but the Red Blacks are also coming off that big win against the Riders, and then you got Stampeders at Hamilton. Could have been the Bo Levi Mitchell return game against Calgary, not in Calgary. We don't get that game this year, but obviously it doesn't look like we're going to get that. And yeah, all around, I don't know. It's late September. There's lots to play for. Every game's big, but it's fun having this game. So, anyways, we're gonna get to Ian Busby, but before we do, I do just very quickly want to just shout out our sponsor, Mugs Pub. We talk about them a lot, but I know on Wednesday's podcast I went kind of deep into their happy hour, which is absolutely amazing. But they also got these weekly specials, which are terrific. Monday, you got Monday Night Football. There's an open jam. You got $6 off pint, $12 hot dog feature. Tuesdays, you got the wing night, $7 wings and rib bites, $24 buckets tool shed. Can't beat it. Wednesday's trivia night, which is something that I did for many, many years. And you got $1 off pint, $2 off burgers. Thursday night football on Thursday with $15 pizza and a pint, $30 pizza and a jug. Friday, there's different events every week, but fish and chips are on special. You got $24 jugs, $5 Jaeger. Saturday, $7 wings and rib bites, $6 tall cans, $5 Jaeger, $14 steak sandwich. There's live music every Saturday night. And then, yeah, Sunday, lots of football. You got a $14 hangover breakfast also, half-price pizza, 25% off Happy's, $6 happy drinks all day. I will say lots of NFL there too. It's a great place to watch football, whether that's CFL, NFL. They got a great Buffalo Bills community. So if you're a Bills fan, make sure you stop by there. Exciting team there this season. But yeah, anyways, thank you to Mugs Pub. We love them. Also, yeah, thank you to Fraser and Fig. We love them. We love you, our listeners. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. Let's get to Ian Busby. This is going to be a pretty Stamps heavy talk. I think it has to be. Right now, Stamps look like they're going to miss the playoffs, and it's kind of hard not to focus on that. Apologize if you're from some other market, but I hope you'll enjoy the chat. We've already done it. It's a good talk. We do talk about other stuff, but the focus obviously had to be on that Stampeders loss. and what it means. So yeah, let's get to Busby. Thanks again to you for listening. Guys, let's say you're having a party. Let's say you're having a picnic. Let's say you're having any occasion. Got to talk to you about Fraser and Fig, because I love these guys. Here in Martin Loop, a couple storefronts down from our studio here. Fraser and Fig, man, these guys do these delicious elevated cheese and charcuterie boxes. You know, they're made with all these fresh artisanal ingredients, on-demand grazing, pick up, delivery. You got it. Just let them know what you want. They will get it to you. Honestly, I'm such a big fan. I had a picnic a little while ago. I brought one of their curated boxes and it was a huge hit. I looked great. People loved it. We're hungry. They weren't hungry anymore. These ready to go boxes, they got them in 4 sizes. All their boxes come with meat, cheese, dried fruit, fresh fruit, nuts, olives, pickles, and carrots. Their selections vary from month to month. Choices are always new. You know, just because they've had one doesn't mean you've had them all. I love Fraser and Fig. I love having them as a sponsor. They're the best. Make sure you check them out. Tell them Live from the 55 sent you. All right, Ian Busby, I got you here. It was Sunday morning.
We're feeling frisk and brisk today, aren't we?
Actually, I got I got 10 hours of sleep last
all
night.
right, yeah. It's amazing what happens when you get a little sleep.
Yeah,
right?
I feel pretty good right now. But what I don't feel pretty good about is
the Calgary Stampeders' chances of continuing their season past the end of the regular season.
Yeah, so I obviously wrote about this. You have sent out a tweet. I kind of want to just hand over the platform to you a little bit to just offer where you're at, because I think that we know, like, let's be clear that we, like, if this team has a chance of making the playoffs, which, like, I don't really think that they do.
I mean, there's technically a chance.
Yeah, so we can't dismiss that, but, like, there's just no real reason to believe it's going to happen. And I am not, as sort of a reporter who at this point is like a third of the time covering the team, just because I can't really make practices because of my Flames duties. I still have like an obligation to try to remain objective. I said what I sort of had to say in my piece, which we're going to get into. I'm not going to shy away from any of it, but it's at this point, yesterday's game after the Riders lost on Friday, I thought, okay, this is it. Like, you either show me that you guys have it or you don't. And let's be totally real, they didn't.
They don't. And it's how many times are you going to get handed the baton without actually grabbing it and running with it? Because this was, like you said, like the Riders losing gives you like this whole thing was like, okay, it's yours. All you got to do is, I went and looked at that and was like, all they have to do is win their games and they're going to make the playoffs. That's all you had to do.
And you don't even need to beat. They didn't, like, that BC game in Vancouver. I think I had chalked all season after I saw what happened in August.
Yeah,
I thought, okay, that's a loss.
But there's no sense that this team is putting anything together, and it's just been so. I've covered the Stampeders for a long period of time, and it's been a long time, way back in the memories where it was just they just don't put games together. They don't put plays together. They don't have the plays to win games. And then they make these crucial errors that you just were like, this is so uncharacteristic of the Calgary Stampeders. I'm thinking of the Reggie Bagleton fumble. It was like, Reggie's just having a great season, and he's a guy you rely on. And then they're like, okay, this is a crucial point of the game where they can get back in and they can score a touchdown on this drive. You think that's going to get things together, and then it's just ball comes out, and that's it. It's like, okay.
We always hear that these games come down to 2 or 3 plays.
Yeah,
and I think that was obviously one of the big ones. But then the other two are, I mean, their opening drive, I don't know if they were quote unquote in the red zone, but they had, sort of they had moved downfield.
Yes,
looked pretty confident doing it. Their plays were working, everything, and then there's that interception. Now, that Sean Lemon interception, by the way, because I mean, my intro, which I haven't recorded yet, is going to be about Sean Lemon. But
what a really nice game for him to come back and.
Well, I think I also will say that there was clearly an offside there. So it was like that should have been a free play. But either way, it wasn't. It's a Sean Lemon interception. So that first drive where you're trying to establish momentum, you're trying to show that
come out and put points on the board when you get the ball given to you. You got to put the points.
0 points there. Yeah. So those are 2 key moments, and then I think that the other, like, I think that the moment
the interception in the end zone down on the other side of the field.
After Nick Stats had made a great play intercepting Cody Fajardo on their first drive, and then the Stamps sort of marched downfield, and on third down they come away with no points. I mean, that's 2, whether it's trips to the red zone or whether that is trips, close to Montreal territory at the very least, and they come away with no points. And I think those 2 and the Bagleton, but it is the thing that I find difficult, and I have found difficult with the Stampeders team, is that there's just, like, it's always mistakes.
Yeah.
And they're not always the same mistakes.
No.
But there's always just these mistakes, and I think that when you're winning, good things tend to happen to you, and when you're losing, bad things tend to happen to you.
Yeah. It's
Um,
the snowball effect, right?
yes.
It's like, okay, we're gonna continue to do what we've been doing, and it just snowballs and keeps rolling downhill. And this thing's rolling downhill right now.
Well, it
And
feels that way,
I don't
and
feel like there's any way that they're gonna be able to stop this now. And we've got 4 games remaining. They're 2 games back of the Riders. And I sent out and I said, stick a fork in them. I think they're done. And somebody was like, well, they're not mathematically done. And the team that they're chasing is not any good anymore right now anyway. I'm like, but they have shown no signs that they're going to win any of the last 4 games.
I
Like
mean,
there's, you
the
look at,
lead of my story, tell me if you agree with this, but was at some point it stops mattering if there's still a path open for the Calgary Stampeders to make the playoffs. There's no indication that they are a team that's capable of taking
yeah.
advantage.
And that's what I said is like stick a fork in. It's not even so much that they, they can make the playoffs, but they don't look like a playoff team. They don't look like a contender. They're not somebody that's going to win 2 playoff games to get into the Grey Cup. That's not going to happen. It's not. There's no sense of indication that this team is putting it together. And I'm like,
They've
like,
won one game since, I mean, the first week of August, they beat the Argos,
yeah.
who were Chad Kelly got hurt early in the second quarter.
And
other than
at that point in time, it looked like, okay, yeah, they can, like, they're going to get through this tough stretch with at least 1 win. And now,
yeah, and then you got to beat Edmonton twice. Like that was always sort of an. I mean, I remember Ryan Ballantyne, who is the king of optimism. But I think he was like, look, if they're 2-9 coming out of August, so be it. The Riders aren't gonna run away with it. The Ticats aren't gonna run away with it, and you still have a shot. And then the Stamps will, as they always do, turn it around. And the issue is that it doesn't feel like they've turned it around. And I want to stay focused on the game, and we'll talk about the sort of the peripheral issues in a second. But the reality is, it also felt like this week, like, oh, Trey Roberson had those tweets, and I was like, well, what's going on there?
yeah.
Markeith Ambles was cut. I will say that I obviously have people in the club who I can sort of ask questions to. I've never seen anyone so tight-lipped. It's nope, we're not talking about what Markeith Ambles being released. Was brought back, looked great. Clearly, there was some unhappiness there. I'm not going to cast aspersions. I genuinely have no idea what happened. But Markeith Ambles is no longer there.
Yeah.
Shylem Zukes, you're back in, and it's just those things where, unfortunately, I don't think that the Stampeders are an organization or a club in disarray. I don't believe that.
No.
But I believe that I felt this with the Flames last year. Winning breeds something where people come to work and they're ready to fight for each other and ready to die for each other. And for bad teams, it always feels like whenever teams are losing, it feels like, oh, well, there must be something fundamentally wrong. I don't know that there is or there isn't, but it does feel like without the wins, there's not a togetherness.
Yeah.
And I was still, Dickinson is emphatic that this team still fights and still works hard. It's not an effort issue, but it's all those other things that you need to happen. And look, I mean, we've talked about it, but these little screen passes to the side of the field that the Stampeders rely on, apparently, like they just don't seem to be working this year. And
there's not one thing that you can put your finger on with this 4-10 season, which is going to be their first losing season since 2007. So they're going to be under 500 for the first time since 2007. Like that's a long period of time, but you can't point to one little thing and say, this is the reason. Like, okay, there's been lots of injuries, but you've overcome injuries in the past. You've had a young quarterback play that is sometimes mistake heavy. Well, that's not all of it either. And then you're like, okay, defensively, they're still a strong team. What's the problem there? It's just like it's just all has come together, and none of it has been super positive. So it hasn't turned the tide, which it usually does with this organization, right? So,
yeah, and even like yesterday, the final score was 28-11.
Yeah,
it didn't really feel like a 28-11 game until the end.
Yeah.
And
I just felt like it was like, okay, well, they got to put some points on the board, right? And it was like, oh, they got too many times they got close and then didn't put points on the board. And I was like, okay, you can't just keep missing your opportunities. You're only going to get so many opportunities. And I think their opportunities now have just kind of run out.
But that's the thing. It's just too late to really.
They've run out of time on this season. That's what I think. That's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, really, like you have
the optimist always says, right? It was like, we didn't lose. We just ran out of time. It's like, okay, well, eventually you're going to figure it out. They aren't figuring it out.
But I feel comfortable talking about this because Dickinson's talking about this, and like Dickinson's was asked, "Oh, do you still believe?" And he was like, "I can't even think about the playoffs, man. I just want to get one win." And like that's the thing is that and this is so basic and so like Captain Obvious over here, but like a season is an accumulation of one wins or one losses, right?
No.
And right now, like they just can't get the win. And you're right. I can't pinpoint what the real issue is. Like I I
You can't just say, let's fix this problem and it's going to resolve
yeah.
itself, right?
Okay,
Like
stop
when you
turning
go,
the ball over. Well,
yeah,
every team turns.
that's just basic football, right? You can't turn the ball over. You can't, you know, you you can't just give the opposition the ball over and over and expect to win.
Well, and
But so it's just obvious. But it's like
I've had
when you look
people
at going into next year, what are you going to say? It was like, what do they need to fix in the offseason? It's like, and like just play better, like just
I've said this, and I felt at the time, okay, there was when free agency hit last year, there was a lot of concern among Stamps fans. Um, I was sort of covering it peripherally because I was very much in Flames land at that point. But I watched it and I liked them bringing in James Fodders. I liked all of there were moves. I thought Julian Hauser, sure, he was an East All Star. Like there's they brought in good pieces. Um, the moment, and this is not the first time I'm saying this, but losing Jameer Thurman felt to me like, and I'm sure it's a money thing. I don't think they wanted to lose Jameer Thurman. I'm not
no,
implying that, and look, there's 8 other teams in this league, right? Like that's
yeah,
the reality. But for me, it felt last year like Jameer, and it normally would have been Bo, who would come out and like sort of know the history of the team and know the culture of the organization. And Bo was responsible for sort of feeling like he was carrying that forward. Same with Derek. There were other players, but last year it really felt like Jameer Thurman. But the last press conference that we had with Bo before the final home game of the season, um, you know, the big question was, is Bo going to get in? Are Stamps fans going to have a chance to applaud and say thank you to Bo?
right.
And Bo was adamant that he, for the good of the team, he didn't care. And then Jameer came out and talked about for the guys who went into the trenches, you're my QB1. He understood the moment and the significance and the history and the culture of this organization and of football in Calgary and how Bo related to it. Now, that may sound like a silly media thing, but I think that stuff matters. I think that's leadership. And I think that when they lost Jameer, I had a really big, like, it was the one that just struck me
Felt
as,
like it felt like a you're taking one of your vital organs away, right?
yes,
It's just like, okay, that we're gonna need that.
yes.
And now they don't have it.
And that's representative of something bigger, though, which is that, like, when Derek Dennis was on this podcast probably about 3 weeks ago, he said, oh, you would have thought we would have learned from 2021
Right.
that you need veterans. And for all the talk of, like, and it was always the thing with Huffnagel as GM was like, he let you go a year earlier than you expected, right? Like
Well,
he moved on, he kept getting younger guys in. But that was when you have a bunch of veterans and you're filling in losing one veteran. This year it sort of felt like they came in and they were a little unmoored. And then Kadeem Carey was supposed to sort of be one of the big leaders. He missed most of the season. We saw how great he is yesterday. I will say I would put that ball in Reggie Begelton's hands. Like, this is why I'm saying it's hard to pinpoint what is wrong, because Reggie with that fumble, I'm giving that ball to Reggie 100 times out of 100.
100%. And that's what I mean. It's completely out of character.
So
and
is
just
that on
surprising.
the coach that your best player made a mistake? Mistakes
No.
happen.
But the thing is, the mistakes have just compounded to the point where it causes them not to be able to strike at the end and win a football game.
Yeah.
And it's just there's just something, like, I think maybe we just pinpointed it. Like, there was just something missing this year of this team, whether there was like I wouldn't say a leadership. I don't know. Like, we're not in the locker room, so it's hard to say.
We don't want to say
like,
leadership, because that like, look, I think Mike Rose and Derek Wigan and Cam Judge, I think those guys are all leaders, and I think there are other guys who stepped up. But like, it just feels like that thing where it's like, sometimes you don't have to have momentum and you don't have confidence. You have to manufacture it.
Yes.
It has to come from somewhere. And I think that's really hard for every losing team in every sport. But I think sometimes it is those 1 or 2 players who can do it, who can come up with the big play that changes momentum just a little bit and makes you believe. And I'm not saying that that's not there, but it feels like it's not there to me as someone who is not in the locker room, isn't even on the sideline. It's just up in the press box watching. And we keep talking about, like, oh, well, we can't pinpoint the one thing. Well, it's like, we also, like, it's not just that the negative things seem to happen, that the mistakes in bad moments. It's also that sometimes just the big plays are missing.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit, I've been asked several times, is the GM head coach job just too much for Dickinson at the same time? And I just don't believe that it is.
I don't think so either. But what do you go into this offseason and think about fixing? What would your focus be?
I think that they're a tackle short.
Okay.
I think that the offensive line. I actually like the interior, and this is not me knocking. They're putting young guys in. These guys take time to develop. Same way that I preach patience with quarterbacks. I will say that I think that their offensive line just like it needs time.
Right.
But you know, I don't know that there is an offensive lineman out there. But
Right.
there's
If it was available, they would go get that, right?
Well, for all the jokes that I make at times, just to sort of troll Winnipeg about, the Bombers sticking with these older guys. It's like,
But you know what you're getting,
I'd
right?
stick with Stanley Bryant no matter what. I don't care. I don't care if he's 50 years old. I know what he can do. And,
Well, this is why he's still playing
yeah,
after
a slight regression from Stanley Bryant still makes him one of the.
He was on the 2014 Grey Cup winning team with Calgary, and he's still playing. And
Exactly.
he's still a key member. And he's like, has he stepped off a little bit? Yes, he's not what the player he used to be, but you still like that consistency. And then there's that intangible. Like, okay, a reliable guy makes everybody around him feel like we can trust it.
Yeah.
And that's maybe there's just a lack of like trust and belief that they're going to go out there and make these plays to win these games. And there's just that thing is missing right now. I'm like, I don't.
Well, it's hard. It's like, well,
I don't know what they were going to just like magically wave a wand over the offseason and go, okay, we need to fix this and this and this, and then we're going to be good.
Well, and you're obviously not just running it back, and that's not what I'm going to suggest. But I mean, I look at yesterday's game, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't think they got a single sack against a team that allowed the most sacks in the league. Well, James Waters would have made that a lot better.
Yes.
I honestly, I mean, like, man, I love Sean Lemon. Like, it's just like I tweeted this, and it's got more interaction than anything I've tweeted at football related in literally months. But like, how is that guy outside? He has 7 sacks. He started playing in week 8. Like he's going to get to 100 next week. He's just incredible. And it's just that type of player.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I saw a lot of like both him and Derek Sankey out there, former Stampeders. Darnell, sorry.
Yeah.
Derek, who was anyway. Them two together, they looked like they were having so much fun. There was just a lot of joy you could see from Sean Lemon. He's like, he's still playing and having a great time out there.
Man loves football.
And you could tell he was just like, oh man, he's out there. He's just laughing, joking, having a great time. His former team. I mean, every team is his former team, technically, almost.
Other than Hamilton.
Right. But and then it's like, okay, so he gets the sack in the last minute. And I was like, all right, perfect. He got 2. He's now at 99. I'm like, oh.
I tweeted. I was like, I want the Stamps to get the ball back.
Just to give him a chance. I was like, I knew you were going to be all over that. I was like, oh, yeah. Like, you're going to love it because he's just racking up the numbers. And, interception early in the game, that was a significant, like we talked about it earlier. I was like, yeah. And his sacks felt like big, meaningful moments as well. And
it's so, like, I just look at the stat line and I'm like, okay, if you told me they were going to limit Cody Fajardo to 252 yards passing with 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and then Stanback, this should speak to the respect that I have for Stanback. I mean, he got 81 yards, so he didn't get nothing. But like, that's not William Stanback ran for 150 on you or anything.
No,
I'm like, okay, well, those defensive numbers are pretty good.
Yeah,
like for the Stamps, you're okay with that. Look, we wanted more pressure. You would have all of that, but like, it's not bad. And yet they gave up 28 points, and it's just honestly, it's the 11. So what would I be doing? I do think the offensive line is an issue. I mean, you're counting on Jake getting better, and then
you're counting on the guys that missed the majority of this year to come back and be healthy and be in action next year, right?
That's the thing. Next year, if it's a Malik Henry, Reggie Begelton, Mark and Michelle, those are your 3
and
Americans.
Phil Potts is your number 1 Canadian, and then he's your 4th.
Clark Barnes is back, and then you're not hoping Clark Barnes will be back. So yeah, and then you need these guys off the IR. And I don't know. Like I'm not a smart enough football mind. Like to tell you. Like I just think that again, I use this Bombers comparison. Like like veterans matter, and you need. I don't. I see there. I'm at practice, or I've been at practice for most of the season. This is not a group that dislikes each other. This is not a group that is like getting into fights or not. Like they're coming to work every day, and the 17 people in the sixth game is hard to ignore. Um, but the reality is, look, I think the Elks are going to be better next year.
They're on the upward
they're-
trajectory. And had they started Trey Ford earlier in the year, they would be in a playoff position right now, probably.
Yeah, I
Like,
have.
they're a team that is like, okay, well, they now have figured a lot of things out. They ran out of time because they went 0-9 to start the year. Like that's just
Yeah.
you're putting yourself too far behind.
It's funny how I was thinking this on the way in because I knew we were going to like I try to keep the CFL and we will talk about sort of the rest of the games and everything, but like it's hard for me to not like look at it and be like, it's funny how 4-11 for the Elks feels one way and 4-10 for the Stamps feels something completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
But the reality is like the Elks are showing growth and showing
they've won 4 of their last
and-
6 games, and they've given teams like BC a real tough time. They did the other night, right? So,
and I obviously hope that if Trey Ford has an NFL opportunity, he goes. And then selfishly, I'm like, I want him in the league. But yeah, I think BC is going to continue getting better. I don't think they're going anywhere next year. I mean, we don't know with free agency, but you just kind of have that feeling. And the Bombers, even if they keep the same piece together and they're a year older, are still going to be competing. And like the Riders have taken a step this year. It hasn't been great. If Trevor Harris was in there, I think they'd have a couple more wins. And so if you look at it, you're like, okay, well, the Stamps, if you can't just rely on incremental improvement from young players next year.
They've got to do something, is what you're basically saying. But what do they do? We don't know.
No, and I mean, I saw Julian Charles leave the game at least for a while last year. I don't know if he came back. Like their DB situation is brutal, and I like, what do you do when you have all these guys on the sixth game? I don't know, and that's really hard. Like I don't know. I definitely think that keeping Jonathan Moxey back would be a priority. I think Brandon Dozier's had a good year in challenging circumstances. I don't know if Trey Roberson's back. They pay him a lot. There was obviously something that happened this week.
Seems unhappy.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't get that impression until these tweets, and I should note that Trey has said that those tweets were not football related. But look, it's football's a puzzle, and the puzzle didn't come together this year. And I think that you and I we have a different emotional investment in this. So I mean, everything I see as fans just fed up. I don't really have that. I'm sort of looking at it as
well. I'm the same way. I'm just kind of flabbergasted that I keep thinking that they're going to turn it around and put it together, and then they don't. And I'm like, I put my money where my mouth is, and I bet on them to win, and then it's like, what? They're not winning. I don't understand. I was like, I've lost a lot of money on them in the last, but that's not to complain about that. It's just because I still have believed, and now I've lost belief.
I mean, I've lost belief that they're going to make the playoffs. I truthfully have not fully lost belief in sort of the process. And I try to have a bit of a longer memory than some, and I'm just like, I'm sorry. I've seen this team make the playoff with this basic coaching staff for years, and like I also like do have faith in them bouncing back, but not this year. I think that unfortunately it just feels this year, and it's interesting sort of being so close to it because last year was Saskatchewan when it was like, oh, the wheels have come off there. This is nowhere near that. I'm not trying to imply that it's anywhere near as bad as it was with the Riders last year. But
then you knew what it was. It was like, oh, they can't protect their quarterback. Like that was the thing with the Riders last year. And then so there's not one.
There was also just like drama that starts coming out, right? Like, and it's that thing where you're like, oh, they need it to be next season. And that's just a little bit how I feel with the Stamps.
How weird is it going to be to actually have games where the Stampeders are eliminated from the playoffs and still playing games? That hasn't happened since 2004. Like it's just,
it may come down to the last week of the season for that though, because I'm not. Look, let's go. Let's do some rapid fire here a little bit, but I did watch the Riders lose to the Red Blacks.
Yeah, I did too.
I can't like sit here and be like, oh, what's gonna happen?
No, as much as we're going like, oh, this is not like. There's a lot of angst there too because they're okay, how are they not putting things together? They should be building towards the playoff.
And they've got a young quarterback. And
Yeah.
I don't know how young, but they've got an inexperienced CFL quarterback. So there's a level where it's probably inevitable that there are going to be ups and downs. I mean, I just think they're going to make the playoffs by default because I don't think the teams coming up behind them are going to win enough games. So, but this is again like what's I follow a couple Red Blacks fans more than anything on Twitter, and they were at the point with this Red Blacks team over the last couple of weeks where they're just like, I don't care that they're close.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care that the games are close. Like, you win or you lose, and this team is losing, and I'm fed up, and it's been so many years of losing. But I always felt with the Red Blacks, I was like, yeah, but they are close. And they're close with Crum, like, as your quarterback, who I'm not saying, I don't mean that, I think Crum's bad, but
but he started the year 4th on the depth chart.
Exactly.
I think there's enough there that they can move forward and look at Dustin Crum now and being like, okay, that might be a guy we're going to invest our resources in and keep moving forward. And
I sort of think you have to. I mean, what other quarterback? Like,
there's nobody.
Is the argument that it's Drew Brown? Like, who is he? The big free agent?
Like just keep going on their trajectory. The seeing that crowd finally get rewarded was nice because they have been a really strong fan base for a lot of ever since they came back into the league, and you like the whole atmosphere around that Ottawa situation, and like it was just nice to see them win a game and feel good about themselves, and they're not in any danger of like getting into the playoff contention.
I mean, they're similar to the Stampeders in the fact that like they're 2 games back of Hamilton, but they got 4 games left in the schedule. Like,
right, it's just there's not enough.
You need Hamilton to lose all of their games, and then you need to basically
make sure that the West team doesn't get. One of the West teams could come in and bite you as well, because that's still in play, even though it seems so highly unlikely right now.
The Red Black schedule is back-to-back against the Alouettes, and despite what I saw this weekend, I don't think the Alouettes are a world beater. I'm not picking the Red Blacks to win, but like, would it shock me after they beat the Riders if they beat the Alouettes? No, but then you're just praying that you're back-to-back against Toronto. Toronto just decides to rest everybody. And I will say, as I was walking through,
I watched that game as well.
Well, so let me get to that, because I just want to like preface it. As I was walking at McMahon Stadium, a person who doesn't who's not like a Stamped Peters like coach or anything, but someone at McMahon Stadium was like, man, I can't believe the Argos are already resting guys because Ouellette wasn't playing. And he's like, they're gonna screw us. And then they just go out and just like, just casually just lay a beating on the Ticats. That was 29-14, but that felt like it was done.
Well, because they came out and they got 20 points so quickly and easily that they were just like, okay, we're going to cruise to victory. And it felt that's what they've done for the last month and a half here, where they just get a bunch of points early and they hold on and run the ball and they just execute well. And there's not really any issues there. They're just
Chad Kelly only threw for 242 yards. If anyone holds Chad Kelly's like yards numbers total against him at the end of the season,
they can go screw themselves, because that's the stupidest thing you could look at.
Exactly. He did not need to throw for more yards to beat the Ticats, so they rolled into let's eat the clock and win the game.
They're the best ball possession team in the league right now, and they can run the ball like crazy even without their top running back this week. So it's just continues to be okay. It's everybody's waiting to. Okay, are the Argos who's going to beat them? That's the question.
I will say that I watched this game. I was just like, I was writing, to be clear, like you just
working and watching.
I was at McMahon finishing up my story with it on ahead of me. So it's not like I watched every single play in great detail, but I watched enough. And I was just like, wait, how did the Tigers beat the Bombers?
How did they beat the Lions?
Yeah.
Like they went into BC and beat them too. And
I just ultimately think that Toronto is so good that like they make other teams look bad, and that's great. But like it was just very weird, because I still like have the Argos are well ahead as my number 1, but the Bombers are, despite the Lions being right on their tails, they might be tied in the standings right now.
They are tied for first right now.
I still sort of have the Bombers as my team I wouldn't want to play in the playoffs. If you were like, you had to pick between the Lions and Bombers, this is no knock on the Lions, but I'm going to pick the team that's been to 3 straight Grey Cups. Won 2 of them. Like, I still have the Bombers in that number 2, scared of them in the playoffs, 1 game single. But then like maybe I'm an idiot, because
I say this about myself all the time. There's
Yeah.
no question about it. I'm an idiot. But next week's game, I think, is going to be the telling one where Bombers are coming off a bye. They're going to be facing Toronto at home.
It is.
And that is the
September 29th. It's the first game of the week, 6
Yeah.
p.m. Mountain. So that's 8 p.m. in the East. I mean, I don't know why I'm going through time zones right now. But
set your alarm now
Yeah.
as you're listening to this on a Monday morning to make sure that Friday night you know exactly where you are.
Yeah, time zone talk with Danny. But this is the one, because this game is bigger, in my opinion, than just. Well, I mean, the Bombers need to win.
Yeah, and then they've got BC in Vancouver the week after. So
yeah,
this is the juice of
the two biggest games of the season are Argos at Bombers September 29th. I wrote this down on a pad of paper.
Look at you, preparation.
I know.
I don't have any pad or paper or anything.
Don't worry, we can get you a pad of paper. But then it's Bombers at Lions October 6th. It's back-to-back weeks. And I think there's a lot that we do know. We sort of know who is. I'm not saying there's no playoff races because I learned that lesson. But
there are playoff races, and the one for third in the West is a Turtle Derby, but the first place race is on, and BC taking care of business in Edmonton. Felt like Edmonton gave them a lot they challenged them a lot in that game, so they came out with the victory. So again, it's like, okay, it sets it up for the last and one game to go to the Grey Cup. It's a significant thing. You don't have to prep that week. You don't have to put your body through the West semifinal.
Mm-hmm.
You just have one game to get there. The numbers show that team that hosts that game is more often.
And both of these games are
goes to the Grey Cup.
I mean, to be honest, this game probably isn't in the standings big for the Bombers or the Argos. Like, who cares if you're the Argos? If you lose this one, it doesn't matter in the standings. But I think it matters in terms of you won the Grey Cup. Everyone still thought that the Bombers were the best team in the league.
Yeah.
You come into the season, everyone has all these questions about Chad Kelly, all of this. If you beat the Bombers, it's just like I hate when people
sending a message.
You are the
whatever.
team. Like, if the Bombers beat you, and I don't think it's seeded out in the Argos locker room, but people are always talking until you beat them again, until you play them in the Grey Cup. The conversation is going to be
right.
Oh, did the light just go off?
Yeah.
That's okay. The conversation is going to be, well, the Argos and Bombers are 1 and 2. And the Bombers did beat them. We learned that. So if you're the Argos, you send a message. It firmly establishes you as the most terrifying team in the CFL. They already should be there, but a Bombers win gives a lot of confidence. We talked about how confidence builds confidence, right?
Yes.
And then if you're the Bombers and you are going into BC, and we saw BC came in when they played early in the season. BC came into that game, wanted to send a message, did.
Bombers got the message sent right back to them the next time they were there.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we know that both teams are eyeing each other up. And look, as you said, playing the West Final at home, if you are the Bombers, it's the rest, it's all of that. Imagine if you're the Lions, it means not having to go to the prairies in the middle of November and play what is likely going to be a game.
Does anybody want to go to Winnipeg in middle of
it's not
early
just
November?
The rest, it's not having to play in the prairies. So those two games, I mean, we've been waiting for them, and it's crazy for me because I always had this week so because I was like, all right, just as someone who is close to the Stampeders, this is the game that they're going to get to play Bo. That's obviously not happening.
Yeah.
And then it's just the other games like the Riders BC. If you're the Riders, you want to stop the bleeding. I just really don't think that
not a good time to do it against a BC team that's motivated to continue putting the pressure on that first place. Yeah, they have that prize in mind, so it's not going to be easy on the Riders. This is a good fun week of games, and it's
Well, I went through
on paper, Hamilton versus Calgary with their records, it doesn't look that great. And without Bo being in that game, it's just like, okay, it's not the juice that you were expecting. And Hamilton didn't make a visit to Calgary this year, which was just turned out to be.
That should have been week 2.
Yeah. Would have been easier to drum up storylines from that, obviously.
It's one of those ones where we're all critical of the CFL while also forgetting that the schedule was released way before he signs.
Before he signs, yeah.
It's actually not that big.
But when I many years, you played each team twice, no matter what. whether they were in your division or not. Then you had bonus games against every teams in your division. It just doesn't seem that it should be that difficult to figure that out. You don't need to play 3 against 1 and 1 against the others. Like it shouldn't happen that way.
It's a 9-team league, man. There's no
I know
actual...
the schedule seems fairly simple,
Yeah.
but what do I know?
What do I know either? It would have been, I mean, it would have been a magical day to have sort of Bo come back. And again, like I'm just anyone who knows me, I don't actually have a particularly close personal relationship with Bo in any way, but I've got a lot of respect for what he did in Calgary and for the organization. And I do believe he's the only quarterback who won 2 Grey Cups as a Stampeder. So,
Yeah.
you know, he goes down as, if you don't think he's the greatest, he's neck and neck with those guys. And it would have been cool to have Stamps fans again get the opportunity to say thank you and him to acknowledge them. But who knows? Maybe that happens next year. I have no idea what Bo's future holds.
Well, there was like a little bit of a shot of him working out in that game yesterday, and I was like, okay, well maybe he's throwing the ball and he's getting there. Who knows, right? I mean, his leg was completely taped up. I was like, okay, at some point in time, it's like, okay, he's not going to be able to tape himself up and get back out there. But
this is one of those situations where I should know better than to like say anything. But like, there's no way he's playing this weekend. There's no way.
Well, you never know. But
no, and it is one of the more intriguing stories of the final month for me on a personnel level. Is just whether like Bo gets back in. Like, I'm curious if the Stamps, I think for as long as they're mathematically sort of still in it and you have that game with the Riders, but like, are we going to start seeing more Tommy Stevens? Not because I think he's better than Jake or anything, but just because do you want to get an idea of what you have in some of these young quarterbacks? And they've got 2 other guys. Again,
it's tough when you're developing a young quarterback. You want to give him as many reps as possible, right? You still want to develop Jake. So we're not at that level yet, but man, oh man, it's just so weird it's just so foreign as someone who's been in Calgary and covering football for so long to think about games not mattering at the end of the year.
Well, it's bizarre. And I mean, I'm willing to go on. I can tell you that this October 13th Saskatchewan Calgary game, I imagine that when the schedule was released, the business people of Calgary were like, all right, well,
that's going to be a good one.
A big game. We're going to have all the Riders fans. It's going to be huge. And I just wonder if people are showing up for it at this point. But I mean, look, it's not officially over, and who knows? Like, if the Stamps beat Hamilton and then like
and Riders lose, so there's still a game back with 3 left. I'm like, okay,
they have a head-to-head, and if they win the head-to-head,
then they have the tie break, and
the
then
path is right there. Like, it's like every time that I'm like ruling them out, it's still. And I've just said so many times, this is a must-win. If you lose this, you're done. And then something happens and it's not true anymore. I do quickly before you go, I just want to like add, because I think I'll be accused of like, I didn't like the Mike Iway hit either, the head-to-head, and like there's obviously there's obviously going to be
I was actually thinking
it would be just irresponsible for me to like talk this long about that game and not bring up like
now he's been fined several times for high hits.
This will be his 4th, I'm sure. It's just
it's like at some point you can't deny that you play hard, you play on the edge, but you can't go over it that many times without it being an issue. And it's being unfortunate because otherwise he's had a good season, but he's just is taking those liberties, and it's disappointing. I think that's the best way to say it. It's been disappointing watching, and every week it seems like, okay, he's done something. You're like, don't do that. Like, don't do that. And sometimes it's just got to stop.
I don't know that it's every week.
It's tough as a defensive player because you got to play with that hard edge, but you can't go over the line, and he's gone over the line a few times.
Exactly. I don't know that it's every week, but it's there, and that I really didn't like that hit, and it's obviously not going to be any sort of surprise.
I mean, he's been fined so much that at this point in time, you might go, maybe they suspend it, but it's one of these times if it continues like this, because the message isn't being sent with the fines.
Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly like head-to-head. We've been trying to get those hits out of the game for a long time. And I know that football happens fast and you are reacting and whatever, but there were enough people on Twitter who are rightfully outraged about it. And I don't think that I can do a podcast talking about the Stampeders, even if they're the team that I cover, and I have a lot of time for Micah as a dude, but it would be irresponsible for me not to bring that up. I think we got to get you out of here.
We got to do some work today.
Yeah. I will be covering a Flames game tonight.
Is that okay?
First
I'm
preseason
I'm
game.
so I'm just so full of hot football that I have no capacity for hockey right now.
Same. I mean, trust me, it's where I'm normally out of this time of the year. I will say that, man, I have a buddy who lives in Portland, and his wife, and man, I thought I might have the chance to go down and see that Colorado Oregon game yesterday. Obviously, I couldn't because I literally like covered Flames in the morning and Stamps in the afternoon. I was never going, but
It would have been nice.
Then I watched that game and I was just like, maybe I didn't have to be there.
No.
But yeah, it's a great time to be a football fan. Ian, thank you so much, man. I'm sure we'll have
thanks
you
for
back next
having me
Sunday again. And yeah, appreciate you. Thanks, bud.
Guys, what are you doing tonight? I don't know what you're doing tonight. You're probably looking for something. Guys, you got to go check out Mug's Pub. This is probably my favorite pub in the city, 1330 15th Avenue Southwest, right in the Beltline. Honestly, they do it all. I, for years, played trivia on Wednesday nights at Mug's. It's the best trivia night in the city. Other nights, they got music. They got specials every single night. Some of the best food and drink specials in the entire city are at Mug's Pub. You want wine, you want beer, you want cocktails. They got it all. Big fan of their fish and chips. They got some amazing pizza. You want to watch the game? They got TV screens. You want to just have a drink with friends? Perfect spot to do it. You want to have some food? As I said, it's delicious. Mug's Pub. We love having them as a sponsor. We love having them just down the road from us here at our studios. Check out Mug's Pub. They're the best.
All right. That is that. Thank you to Ian Busby for stopping by. Always appreciate his insights. He's on most Sundays here, and then he goes directly to his job. So, coming in on a Sunday morning, doing this with us, awesome. We appreciate it. He's got this historical perspective that I sometimes don't have. So, yeah, thank you to Ian for that. Thank you to you, our listeners. Thank you to Mug's Pub. Thank you to Fraser and Fig. We're filled with gratitude here, the Live from the 55 podcast. But yeah, guys, as I said, we've talked about covered a lot this episode, but just looking forward, Argos Bombers game of the season, just massive. These two teams are going to want to send a message. I can't wait for that game. Riders, Lions, Riders need a win. Lions need a win. We're at that time of the season, man. You're fighting for what you're fighting for the Lions. That's first in the West. For the Riders, that's a win here would be huge. I don't think it's going to happen, but would certainly send a message to the rest of the league that you guys are for real and that you're heating up at the right time. And to be honest, would probably bury any remaining hopes for the Stamps and Elks. Yeah, beyond that, you got Alouettes at Red Blacks. It's a fun game. It's more fun because the Red Blacks won. Both these teams are coming off wins. No one's catching the Argos or anything like that. I don't even think the Red Blacks have a real shot of making the playoffs, but they're both coming off a win. Should be fun. And then Stamps, Ticats. We've talked enough about the Stamps today, so I'm not going to go into it. But guys, thank you so much. Again, thank you to Muggs. Thank you to Fraser and Fig. You, our listeners, our viewers on YouTube. We appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends if you like CFL content. That's what we're here for, trying to provide that. So thank you so much for listening and watching, and we will talk to you guys Thursday morning. Thanks. Cheers.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out more of our content right here on the Flames Nation YouTube page. We had a bunch of great long form interviews. You can check out some videos we've done as well outside of the studio. And of course, if you want more writing or merchandise stuff, flamesnation.ca or nationgear.ca. Appreciate you watching.